The sun hung low over the village, casting long shadows across the dusty paths. John, a Christian man from a distant town, arrived carrying only a small bag and a worn-out Bible. The villagers eyed him with suspicion, their voices hushed as he walked past. He could feel their judgment pressing on him, a weight heavier than the midday heat. The air smelled of dry earth and burning wood, and the faint clanging of the blacksmith echoed through the streets. John noticed the hesitation in every glance, the way children peeked from behind doors. He set up a small stall near the center of the village, offering help to anyone who needed it. At first, no one approached. He fixed broken tools, carried heavy loads, and shared stories from his Bible, never asking for anything in return. The villagers whispered among themselves, unsure what to make of his kindness. Days passed, and still, the village remained cold toward him. One evening, a sudden storm swept through the village, lightning splitting the sky and rain turning the paths to mud. A terrified scream pierced the air. John ran toward the sound, the wind tearing at his clothes, the rain stinging his face. He found a young girl trapped under a fallen tree, her eyes wide with fear. With all his strength, he lifted the heavy wood and carried her to safety, soaked and trembling. The villagers gathered, staring in disbelief. No one had dared to approach during the storm, but John had risked everything. For the first time, their eyes softened. They saw his courage, his compassion, and the unwavering calm in his gaze. In the following weeks, John continued to help quietly, never seeking praise. He healed the sick, fed the hungry, and comforted the grieving. Slowly, the villagers began to open their hearts. They invited him into their homes, shared their meals, and listened to his stories of faith. One night, as a cold wind swept through the village, a mysterious fire broke out in the granary. The flames roared high, threatening to consume the entire village. Panic spread like wildfire, villagers screaming and running in all directions. John appeared in the chaos, guiding people out, directing water, and carrying those too weak to escape. Smoke filled his lungs, his eyes burned, and the heat threatened to overwhelm him. At that moment, he did not think of himself. He only thought of saving others. When the fire was finally under control, the village stood in silence. They watched John, charred and exhausted, yet alive. Tears ran down faces that had once looked upon him with suspicion. That night, under the soft glow of lanterns, the village gathered around him. No one spoke at first. Then a small child stepped forward, offering John a piece of bread. The gesture broke the final barrier. Villagers began to share their own stories, their fears, their dreams, and the gratitude. They realized he had never sought to change them, only to serve. In that moment, John understood the power of genuine kindness. He had entered a village of strangers and left a village united. The bond between him and the villagers grew stronger with each passing day. But the peace was fragile. One night, strange noises echoed from the forest surrounding the village. Whispers carried on the wind, chilling the bones of even the bravest men. The villagers huddled in their homes, fear gripping their hearts. John stood outside, listening carefully, feeling the tension in the air. He smelled the damp leaves, heard the rustle of hidden movement, and felt a shiver run down his spine. A shadow flickered between the trees, sudden and fast. A cold dread filled him, a warning that something was coming. He gripped a wooden staff, his heart pounding. The villagers watched from their windows, silently hoping he would protect them. Again, then a figure emerged, larger than a man, cloaked in darkness, its eyes glowing faintly in the night. John stepped forward, unafraid, though every nerve screamed to flee. The creature halted, its gaze fixed on him, as if testing the resolve within. The wind howled around them, carrying the scent of wet earth and fear. John raised his staff, ready to confront the unknown, determined to defend the village that had come to trust him. The moment hung in suspended terror, the entire village holding its breath. The figure stood still, silent, yet its presence seemed to crush the air around John. Every breath he took was sharp, filled with the scent of wet earth, smoke from distant fires, and the metallic tang of fear. He could hear the villagers trembling behind the doors, their prayers whispered into the night, carried on the wind. The shadow shifted slightly, its form flickering, as if made of smoke and darkness rather than flesh. John's heart raced, but his hands remained steady on the staff. He remembered the words he had often read aloud to the children, words of courage, faith, and light. He whispered them now to himself, a quiet shield against the overwhelming fear. The shadow moved closer, and the ground beneath it seemed to ripple like water. A low, guttural sound emanated from it, resonating through the trees, through the mud, and into the bones of every person nearby. John could feel the vibrations under his feet, shaking his resolve for a moment, yet he did not step back. The wind whistled through the trees, carrying a chilling message of danger. Lightning struck in the distance, illuminating the figure for a split second. Its eyes glowed like embers, fixed on John with an intensity that made him question the very air around him. For a heartbeat, he imagined the village burning, the people he had come to love scattered and frightened. Then a strange calm settled over him. He lifted his staff high and began to speak aloud, words of faith and protection, his voice cutting through the night. The shadow hesitated, as if it did not expect defiance. The villagers peeked from behind the doors and windows, their faces pale, their eyes wide with disbelief. The air thickened with tension, every rustle of leaves amplified in the silent forest. Then, with a sudden rush, the figure lunged toward John, moving faster than any human could. He braced himself, planting his feet firmly in the mud. A cold wave of energy hit him, freezing the sweat on his skin, making his teeth chatter. The villagers gasped in unison, fear and awe mixing in their cries. John did not flinch. He raised the staff and stepped forward, letting his voice ring louder than the storm around him. "Leave this place," he commanded, "for this village is under the protection of love, not fear." The shadow recoiled slightly, its form twisting, eyes narrowing. It hissed, a sound that seemed to crawl into every crevice of the night. The ground shook as it struggled to advance, but John's courage formed an invisible barrier. The villagers watched, silent but hopeful, as the man they had once doubted faced a darkness none of them could confront. Lightning struck again, closer this time, revealing the full shape of the figure. It was monstrous, taller than any man, with limbs that seemed to stretch and bend unnaturally. Its shadow fell over the village, darkening the lanterns, the windows, the faces of those who had come to trust John. The wind roared in protest, whipping the trees into frenzied motion. But John stood unwavering. He stepped closer, staff raised, voice unwavering, calling upon strength he had never known he possessed. The shadow shrieked, a sound that could fracture stone, and yet it halted, as if recognizing the courage and faith radiating from him. For a moment, the world seemed to pause. Even the rain slowed, droplets hanging in the air, suspended like fragile glass. Then, slowly, the shadow began to retreat, its form dissolving into the mist. John lowered his staff, heart still pounding, body trembling from the exertion. The villagers stepped out, one by one, silence hanging in the air like a sacred veil. They saw the mud on his clothes, the cuts on his hands, the exhaustion etched into his face. Yet in his eyes, there was no fear, only resolve. A child ran forward, crying, and embraced him, her small arms clinging as if to draw strength from his presence. Men and women followed, some kneeling, some simply staring, all of them transformed by what they had witnessed. John smiled faintly, feeling the warmth of their acceptance wash over him. He realized that fear could not overpower love, and courage could inspire even the most wary hearts. That night, the village celebrated quietly, gathering around small fires, whispering tales of the man who had faced the impossible. They brought food to his door, offered blankets, and spoke in reverent tones. He listened, smiled, and shared his own stories of faith, never boasting, never claiming heroism. Days turned into weeks, and the memory of the shadow lingered, a reminder of what had been overcome. The villagers learned to trust not only him but each other. Neighbors helped neighbors, children played freely, and the fear that had once gripped the village vanished like morning fog. John continued his work, fixing, healing, teaching, guiding. Yet the nights held a new vigilance. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying a faint echo of the darkness that had tested him. But John no longer feared it. He had learned that courage was not the absence of fear but the strength to face it for the sake of others. One evening, as the sun dipped below the hills, painting the sky with fire and gold, the villagers gathered in the square. They placed flowers, lanterns, and candles around a small stone in the center. It was not a monument to a man, but a symbol of unity, courage, and love. John stood among them, heart full, knowing he had become part of something greater than himself. Then, unexpectedly, a sudden chill swept through the square. The lanterns flickered violently, casting shadows that danced like sinister spirits. A low, deep hum filled the air, vibrating through every bone, every heart. The villagers froze, fear igniting in their eyes once more. John felt it too, the pulse of something ancient and dark, lingering just beyond the tree line. He gripped his staff tightly, feeling the familiar surge of resolve. He stepped forward, into the center of the square, as the hum grew louder, as shadows lengthened, twisting unnaturally around the lanterns. The villagers looked on, some trembling, some clutching each other, all knowing that once again, their protector faced the unknown. John inhaled deeply, the scent of wet earth and flowers filling his senses, the wind brushing against his face like a warning and a promise. He lifted his staff high, and in a voice steady and commanding, he spoke words that carried across the village and into the forest beyond. "Return to the darkness from which you came," he declared. "This village belongs to light, to hope, and to the hearts that will not falter." The shadows twisted violently, shrieking, as if resisting his words. The villagers held their breath, feeling the tension coil tighter around them. John stepped closer to the edge of the square, eyes locked on the darkness, heart beating with a rhythm that matched the storm of fear. Suddenly, a blinding flash of light erupted from the staff, cutting through the night, illuminating every corner, every face, every shadow. The darkness recoiled with a deafening roar, scattering into the mist, leaving the village bathed in an eerie, trembling calm. The villagers exhaled together, relief and awe mingling in their voices. John lowered his staff, drenched in sweat, every muscle trembling. He looked at the faces around him, their eyes reflecting admiration, trust, and gratitude. He realized then that fear had been a test, not only of his courage but of the villagers' capacity for belief. They had seen him stand against the unimaginable and had chosen to trust, to hope, and to love in return. The night grew quiet again, the wind softening, carrying only the whispers of leaves and the faint scent of rain-soaked earth. The village would never forget this night, nor the man who had risked everything to protect them. And John knew, deep in his soul, that his journey had changed more than just himself. He had shown a village what it meant to face darkness with faith, to act with courage without expectation, and to love without boundaries. The villagers gathered around him, holding hands, forming a circle of unity and trust. For the first time in years, the village felt truly safe, truly connected, and truly alive. Even the stars seemed to shine brighter, as if acknowledging the courage that had triumphed that night. John stood among them, exhausted but unwavering, knowing that the hearts he had won were not won with words alone but with deeds that spoke louder than any voice. And though the shadows may return, the village would never again cower. They had seen the impossible faced and overcome. They had witnessed faith in action. And they would carry the memory of that courage for generations to come. Weeks passed after the night of shadows, and the village slowly returned to its quiet rhythm. The sun rose gently over the hills, painting the fields in soft gold and green. Children played freely in the streets, their laughter echoing where fear once lingered. Villagers worked side by side, helping one another, their bonds stronger than ever. John moved among them, humble and steady, offering guidance and sharing stories, never seeking recognition. One evening, as the sky turned pink and amber, the villagers gathered in the square. They placed lanterns along the paths and around the small stone that symbolized unity and courage. This time, the gathering was not in fear, but in celebration. A young boy stepped forward, holding a simple bouquet of wildflowers. He handed it to John with a shy smile. The villagers joined him, each offering small tokens, fruits, handcrafted tools, and pieces of cloth. It was a gesture of gratitude, respect, and love. John accepted each gift with humility, his heart swelling not from pride, but from the joy of seeing a community healed. He looked around at the faces he had once met with suspicion and doubt. Now, he saw trust, admiration, and the warmth of hearts fully open. The elders spoke, not of miracles or heroic deeds, but of the quiet kindness, courage, and patience that had transformed them all. John listened, feeling a deep sense of peace he had never known. He realized that true strength lay not in power or fear, but in the ability to inspire hope and courage in others. The villagers sang songs of gratitude, their voices rising together in harmony, filling the air with light and warmth. The wind carried the melody across the fields, rustling the leaves, and whispering through the trees. John smiled softly, watching the village he had grown to love thrive in harmony and unity. The shadows that had once threatened them seemed distant now, powerless against the light of faith, courage, and community. As night fell, lanterns glowed softly in every home, casting gentle shadows that danced peacefully on the walls. John sat quietly on the steps of the square, his staff resting beside him, feeling the gentle pulse of life all around. He understood that his journey had not just been about bravery, but about teaching hearts to open, to trust, and to love one another. The village had changed, and so had he. In that calm, serene night, a sense of fulfillment settled over him. He had arrived a stranger, carrying only hope and kindness. He had stayed, and in return, he had received something far greater, the hearts of an entire village, fully and willingly. A soft breeze brushed his face as the stars appeared, shining like distant lanterns in the sky. John closed his eyes briefly, breathing in the scent of earth, flowers, and home. He knew that wherever his path led next, the lessons of this village, the courage, faith, and unity, would remain within him forever. And in the hearts of the villagers, he would live on, not as a stranger or hero, but as a part of them, woven into the very fabric of their lives. The village slept peacefully that night, safe, whole, and forever changed by the quiet strength of one man who dared to love without hesitation.